What happens when Hollywood's biggest action star walks into the lion's den of daytime television and refuses to play by the rules? What you're about to witness is the most explosive confrontation in talk show history, where Tom Cruise completely dismantled Joy Behar's reputation in front of millions of viewers, leaving her so humiliated she walked off her own show and never returned. This wasn't just an interview gone wrong. This was a complete demolition of everything Joy Behar had built, happening in real time on live television. And it all started with a simple question about doing his own stunts. The morning started like any other at the View Studios in New York. The familiar hum of cameras warming up, the buzz of the studio audience settling into their seats, the frantic energy of producers rushing through last-minute preparations. Joy Behar strutted into the makeup room with her usual smugness, already plotting how she would tear apart her guest. Tom Cruise was scheduled to appear to promote his latest mission, Impossible film, and Joy had been sharpening her claws for weeks. She'd been vocal about her disdain for Cruise's personal beliefs and lifestyle choices. She'd made it clear to her producers that this wouldn't be a friendly interview. And today, she planned to ambush him on live television. "This is going to be fun," Joy muttered to her makeup artist, checking her reflection one last time. "I've got some questions that are going to make him squirm." What Joy didn't know was that Tom Cruise had done his homework, too. He'd watched countless clips of The View, studying Joy's interview style, her favorite attack strategies, and, most importantly, her obvious weak spots. This wasn't going to be another softball celebrity interview where the guest smiled politely while being insulted. Tom Cruise had come prepared for battle. The cameras rolled, the theme music played, and the show began. The other hosts sensed something different in the air. Whoopi Goldberg kept glancing nervously between Tom and Joy. The other co-hosts seemed unusually quiet, as if they could feel the tension building before anyone had even spoken. Tom sat relaxed in his chair, that famous Cruise smile never wavering. But there was something steely behind his eyes. Something that said he wasn't here to be anyone's punching bag. "So, Tom," Joy began, her voice dripping with false sweetness, "let's talk about your new movie. Although I have to say, at your age, isn't it time to stop doing your own stunts? I mean, you're not 20 anymore." The audience chuckled nervously. It was the kind of joke that was supposed to be playful, but everyone could feel the edge beneath it. This wasn't banter. This was the opening shot. But Tom's smile only grew wider. "Well, Joy," he replied, his voice smooth as silk, "I appreciate your concern for my well-being, though I have to say, for someone who's made a career out of sitting behind a desk making jokes, I'm surprised you'd question someone who actually gets up and does the work." The temperature in the studio dropped several degrees. Joy's practiced smile faltered for just a moment before she recovered, but everyone watching could see it. The first crack in her armor. "Oh, that's rich," Joy shot back, her voice taking on a sharper edge. "Coming from someone who jumps on couches." She paused, letting the reference to the infamous Oprah incident hang in the air. "Tell me, do you ever regret making such a spectacle of yourself?" Tom leaned forward slightly, his voice remaining calm and measured. "Joy, I expressed genuine happiness about finding love. But I understand that might be a foreign concept for someone who's built their entire persona around cynicism and tearing others down." The other hosts exchanged worried glances. Whoopi shifted uncomfortably in her seat. This was not going according to plan. "Excuse me?" Joy's voice rose an octave. "I think you're confusing honest journalism with cynicism." "Honest journalism?" Tom's eyebrow arched. "Is that what we're calling gossip and personal attacks now? Because I've watched your show, Joy. I've seen how you operate. You don't ask questions to inform your audience. You ask them to humiliate your guests and boost your own ego." The studio audience was dead silent. You could hear a pin drop. Even the cameras seemed to hold their breath. Joy's face was turning red beneath her carefully applied makeup. "How dare you come on my show and insult me?" she snapped. "Your show?" Tom tilted his head, his voice laced with calculated curiosity. "I thought this was The View with multiple hosts. Or have you forgotten that this is supposed to be a panel discussion? Not the Joy Behar Power Trip Hour." Whoopi tried to intervene, her voice pleading. Let's just take it down a notch here, everyone. But Joy was beyond backing down now. Her ego had been wounded, and she was determined to strike back. Listen here, you little man, she spat, her composure cracking. I've been doing this longer than you've been making movies. I don't need some Hollywood pretty boy telling me how to do my job. Tom's smile never wavered, but his voice carried a dangerous edge now. Little man, he repeated the words slowly, letting them hang in the air. That's interesting, coming from someone whose biggest accomplishment is making other people uncomfortable on daytime TV. And Joy, I've been making movies since before you figured out how to turn bitterness into a paycheck. The audience gasped audibly. Joy's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. She'd never had a guest fight back this effectively, this calmly, this devastatingly. You think you can just waltz in here and disrespect me? Joy's voice was shaking now, barely controlled rage seeping through. Do you know who I am? I know exactly who you are, Joy, Tom replied, his voice steady as a rock. You're someone who mistakes rudeness for wit, cruelty for humor, and thinks that being loud makes you right. You've spent decades hiding your own insecurities behind a facade of superiority. But the truth is, you're just a bully with a microphone. The words hung in the air like a bomb, waiting to explode. Joy's carefully constructed public persona was crumbling in real time, and she knew it. The other hosts sat frozen, unsure whether to intervene or let this train wreck continue. Joy's face was now completely flushed, her professional mask slipping away piece by piece. She looked around desperately at her co-hosts for support, but found only uncomfortable silence. The studio audience watched in stunned fascination as their usually dominant host struggled to regain control. You don't know anything about me? Joy stammered, her voice losing its usual commanding tone. I've dedicated my life to speaking truth to power. Tom laughed, a genuine sound that somehow made it even more cutting. Speaking truth to power? Joy, you are the power here. You have a platform that reaches millions of people every day. And what do you do with it? You use it to mock, belittle, and tear down anyone who doesn't share your worldview. That's not courage. That's cowardice. I ask the tough questions that need to be asked. Joy shot back, but her voice lacked conviction now. No, you ask gotcha questions designed to embarrass people, Tom corrected. There's a difference between journalism and ambush tactics. You don't seek understanding. You seek conflict. You don't want answers. You want ammunition. Whoopi finally found her voice, desperate to defuse the situation. Tom, I think maybe we should move on to talking about your film. Actually, Whoopi, I think this conversation is long overdue, Tom replied, his attention still laser-focused on Joy. Because what Joy represents is everything that's wrong with media today. She's turned discourse into blood sport, and she's proud of it. Joy's hands were trembling now, either from rage or humiliation, possibly both. You sanctimonious little weasel. You think because you've made some action movies you can lecture me about media? I think because I'm a human being who's watched you destroy people on television for sport, I have every right to call you out, Tom replied calmly. And the fact that you just called me a weasel proves my point perfectly. When you can't win an argument with facts or logic, you resort to name-calling. It's pathetic. The other hosts were now visibly squirming in their seats. Sunny Hostin was staring at her hands. Sarah Haynes kept glancing toward the exits. This wasn't just an interview gone wrong. This was a complete demolition of Joy's credibility, happening in real time. You want to talk about facts? Joy's voice cracked slightly. Let's talk about your bizarre personal life, your string of failed marriages, your weird religious beliefs. Tom's expression didn't change, but something dangerous flickered behind his eyes. My personal life is my business, Joy. But since you brought it up, let's examine yours. You've been married multiple times, too. But somehow that's different when it's you, right? And as for religion, I've never used this platform to mock anyone's faith the way you do on a regular basis. I don't mock people's faith. I question dangerous ideologies. Joy protested weakly. You mock everything you don't understand, Tom countered. You've made a career out of intellectual laziness, substituting ridicule for research, contempt for curiosity. You don't question dangerous ideologies. You create them by promoting divisiveness and hatred. Joy was breathing heavily now, her chest rising and falling rapidly. She looked like a cornered animal, desperate and dangerous. I am not a bully, she insisted, but the words came out hollow. I'm repeating your words, Tom said simply. The difference is, without your echo chamber of applause and agreement, they sound as hollow as they actually are. The camera operator was getting shots of the audience, many of whom had their mouths hanging open. This was unlike anything they'd ever witnessed on daytime television. You know what? Joy suddenly stood up, her chair scraping loudly against the floor. I don't have to sit here and take this abuse from some washed-up actor who thinks he's Tom Cruise but acts like a petulant child. Tom remained seated, completely composed. Washed up, Joy? My last film made over $700 million worldwide. What was the last thing you created that brought joy to anyone? And I find it ironic that you're calling me petulant when you're literally throwing a tantrum right now. This is my show. Joy screamed, all pretense of professionalism gone. You're a guest here. Actually, Tom said quietly, his calm making her hysteria even more pronounced. This is The View. It belongs to all the hosts, the producers, the network, and ultimately the viewers. You seem to have confused being one of several hosts with being a dictator. Joy turned to her co-hosts desperately. Are you going to let him talk to me this way? The silence was deafening. Even Whoopi, usually quick to support her colleagues, seemed unable to find words. The truth was, everything Tom was saying resonated because it was accurate, and they all knew it. The fact that you think disagreeing with you equals disrespecting you tells us everything we need to know about your character, Tom continued. You've surrounded yourself with people who either agree with you or are too intimidated to challenge you. But I'm not intimidated by you, Joy. I'm just disappointed. Disappointed? Joy's voice was barely above a whisper now. Yes, Tom nodded slowly. You had a platform, a voice, an opportunity to make a real difference. Instead, you chose to become everything that's wrong with public discourse. You chose division over unity, mockery over understanding, ego over empathy. You had the chance to lift people up, and instead, you've spent years tearing them down. Joy looked around the studio one more time, seeing the faces of the crew, the audience, her co-hosts. For the first time in years, she was seeing herself reflected in their eyes. And she didn't like what she saw. The moment of self-reflection lasted only seconds before Joy's face hardened again. But now there was something different in her expression. The arrogance was gone, replaced by something rawer, more desperate. She was a wounded animal backed into a corner, and everyone in the studio could feel the danger in the air. You think you're so perfect, Joy said, her voice low and venomous. Sitting there in your expensive suit, judging me. But I know who you really are. I know about the control, the manipulation, the way you treat people who work for you. Tom's smile finally faded, but his voice remained steady. Joy, now you're just making things up. And frankly, it's sad. You're so desperate to hurt me that you're willing to spread lies on live television. Is this really who you want to be? I'm not making anything up, Joy insisted, but her voice wavered. I have sources. Sources, Tom repeated flatly. The same sources that fuel all your attacks? Anonymous whispers and gossip? Joy, you just proved my point about your journalistic standards. Real journalists verify their information. You just throw mud and hope something sticks. The other hosts were now looking actively uncomfortable. Sunny was staring at her hands as if they held the answers to the universe. Sarah kept glancing toward the exits like she was planning an escape route. You want to talk about sources? Joy's voice was getting shrill again. Let's talk about how you've silenced people who've tried to speak out against you. Tom leaned back in his chair, completely relaxed. Joy, you're spiraling. Everyone watching can see it. You came into this interview planning to ambush me, But you didn't expect me to fight back. Now you're making wild accusations because your usual tactics aren't working. They're not wild accusations, Joy protested. But even she didn't sound convinced anymore. Then provide proof, Tom said simply. Right here, right now. If you have evidence of wrongdoing, present it. Otherwise, you're just proving that you're exactly what I said you are. A bully who attacks people without justification. Joy opened her mouth, then closed it. The silence stretched on for what felt like an eternity. The cameras captured every second of her struggle. Her inability to back up her claims becoming more obvious with each passing moment. That's what I thought, Tom said softly. Joy, this is exactly the problem. You make accusations you can't support. You ask questions you don't really want answered. And when someone calls you on it, you double down instead of admitting you were wrong. I am never wrong, Joy snapped. But the words sounded hollow even to her. Everyone is wrong sometimes, Joy. The difference is most people learn from their mistakes. You've built a career on never admitting fault, never showing growth, never displaying humility. And look where it's gotten you. Tom gestured around the studio, taking in the uncomfortable faces, the tense atmosphere, the obvious dysfunction. You've created a toxic environment where disagreement is treated as betrayal, where different viewpoints are met with hostility instead of curiosity. You've turned what should be a forum for discussion into a platform for persecution. Joy was shaking now, her hands clenched into fists at her sides. You don't understand anything about what I do here. I understand perfectly, Tom replied. You've confused being provocative with being profound, being controversial with being courageous. But there's no courage in attacking people from a position of power, Joy. There's no strength in picking fights you know you can't lose. Except you're losing this one, someone in the audience called out, and nervous laughter rippled through the studio. Joy spun around to face the audience, her eyes wild. Who said that? Who had the nerve to say that? Joy! Whoopi finally intervened, her voice pleading. Maybe we should take a commercial break. No. Joy turned back to Tom, pointing an accusing finger at him. He started this. He came on my show and attacked me. And now he's turning everyone against me. Tom shook his head slowly, his expression one of genuine sadness. Joy, I didn't turn anyone against you. I simply refused to be your victim. And the fact that standing up for myself feels like an attack to you says everything about how you're used to treating people. You're twisting everything around. Joy's voice was barely controlled hysteria now. You're making me look like the bad guy when you're the one who came here and ambushed me. I answered your questions honestly, Tom said calmly. I defended myself when you attacked me personally. If that feels like an ambush to you, maybe you should reflect on why you're so uncomfortable with honest dialogue. Joy stared at him for a long moment, her chest heaving. She looked around the studio one more time, seeing the faces of people who had worked with her for years, people who were now looking at her with something that might have been pity. She'd come into this interview planning to humiliate Tom Cruise. Instead, she'd exposed herself to the world. Fine, she said suddenly, her voice flat and defeated. You know what? I'm done. I'm absolutely done with this. She began pulling off her microphone with shaking hands. The sound of Velcro ripping echoed through the silent studio. 30 years in this business, and I have to sit here and be lectured by some Hollywood pretty boy who thinks he knows everything. Joy, wait. Whoopi stood up, reaching out a placating hand. But Joy was already backing away from the table. No, Whoopi. I'm not going to sit here and be humiliated in front of millions of people. Not by him. Not by anyone. Tom remained seated, watching her with what looked like genuine sadness. Joy, he said quietly. No one is trying to humiliate you. But if you can't handle being disagreed with, maybe you shouldn't be in the business of controversial opinions. That was the final straw. Joy threw her microphone down onto the table with a loud crash that echoed through the studio. The sound was sharp, violent, a punctuation mark on everything that had just transpired. That's it. Quit. I'm done with this show. I'm done with this network. And I'm done with all of you. She stormed off the set, her high heels clicking loudly on the polished floor. The cameras followed her until she disappeared through the backstage doors, leaving behind a stunned silence that seemed to go on forever. The audience sat frozen. The co-hosts stared at the empty chair. The producers behind the cameras exchanged panicked glances. Tom finally broke the quiet. He turned to the remaining hosts with a small smile, as if he hadn't just dismantled a television personality's entire career. "Well," he said lightly, "should we talk about the movie now?" The tension in the room snapped. Nervous laughter rippled through the audience. Whoopi let out a breath she seemed to have been holding for minutes. The show somehow impossibly continued. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is how Tom Cruise single-handedly ended Joy Behar's career with nothing but truth, composure, and the courage to stand up to a bully. But the story doesn't end there. In the days that followed, the footage of that interview went viral. News outlets across the country dissected every moment. Comment sections exploded with opinions. The clip was played and replayed on late-night shows, morning news programs, and social media platforms around the world. Some defended Joy, calling her a victim of an unfair ambush. But most saw what had really happened. A powerful woman who had spent years attacking others finally facing someone who refused to be attacked. The irony was impossible to miss. Joy Behar had built her career on being the one who asked the tough questions. But when the questions turned on her, when she was the one being examined, she couldn't handle it. She walked off her own show. She abandoned her own platform. And she never returned. Tom Cruise didn't shout. He didn't threaten. He didn't resort to insults or personal attacks. He simply stood his ground with calm, unwavering dignity. He answered every question honestly. He defended himself without losing control. And in doing so, he showed the world what true strength looks like. It's not about being loud. It's not about being aggressive. It's about having the courage to speak truth to power, even when that power is sitting across from you at a television desk.